had some technical difficulties, but welcome to Tales at 2. Once again, my name is Miss Rachel. First of all, I want to thank everybody who's been donating lately. I mentioned yesterday in our live stream that we were getting a matching donation from one of our board members, and from last Friday until today, for every donation up to $5,000. You guys made that happen by last night. So thank you very, very much. If you missed that post, we got the big check and Rambler was there to receive it, so that was great. So thank you all very, very much for that. We so appreciate your support and we so appreciate your help. I also want to mention, just as a general thank you to all of our wonderful volunteers that are starting up this week again. We're starting to do our night shifts, so we're getting volunteers coming back in again to take care of the animals that are still coming in. So thank you all for that, and also thank you to our wonderful videographers who are helping make these videos possible. So today we have Alexandra helping out, so thank you very much. So today we are doing, well, the question was posed to you, who is the title of today's lesson, today's activity. So who do you think we might have? If you guessed anywhere in the vicinity of an owl, you would be correct. So today we do have Hoo-dini coming out to visit us today. He is hanging out in this crate right now. So he will be out in just a minute. Let's just bring him out. Once again, if you guys have any questions, please feel free to ask them as they go. We'll be answering your questions the whole time. And the more questions we have, the more stuff I have to talk about, and the more engaging we can be. All right? So thank you all for joining us. All right. Let's see how well he behaves. Usually he's pretty good. We'll see. Oh my goodness. I don't know if you can hear, but he hisses quite a bit. Hi. Step up. Step up. Come on. Step up. Come on. Oh, good boy. Another one. Come on. Step up. You're being difficult today, aren't you? Come on, step up. There we go. Oh boy. I know. Oh my goodness. Get your balance. Go ahead. So, this is Hoo-dini. Oh, stop that. Hoo-dini is a great horned owl. Okay. He is... I meant to look up how many years he's been here. Maybe Miss Erin knows in a minute. I'm trying to remember. I believe he's been here about 7 or 8 years, maybe a little bit longer. He is here because he does have a wing injury, so he cannot fly well enough to find food on his own. But I believe his injury is his left wing.
Mm-hmm.
No, is it left wing?
Yeah.
One of them, yeah. Okay. Now, like I said, Hoo-dini is here because he can't fly well enough to find food. Hoo-dini is a great horned owl. Great horned owls are the largest owl that we have in New Jersey year-round. We do have occasionally a larger visitor, but they're really rare. But these guys will stick around year-round. We're actually just past their mating season and their nesting season, so by now he should, if he were in the wild, he would have eggs. He might even have young babies hanging out. They are a pretty big bird. He's actually really, really strong too. I know you guys can't see it, but he's actually gripping my finger really, really tightly right now. If you can see his talons coming in. So his talons are really, really strong. Now, you guys know that owls are going to be flying around at night, right? So these guys, for the most part, they're using a bunch of different adaptations to find their food. Now, for owls in general, they have some really, really cool adaptations. They are a predator to begin with, so they are going to be eating other animals, so they are a bird of prey. But in addition to having like the big talons and the big sharp beak that you might have seen with Eldora, our red-tailed hawk, he also has some other things that help him hunt at night. One of the first things you might notice is he has those huge eyes. So those are those big, beautiful eyes. Those are so that he can see as well as he can at night. Now, they don't shine like a flashlight. He's not putting light out. What they do is collect light. So the black part, the pupil, will get really, really big, and he'll be able to bring in as much light as possible so that he can see all the tiny little things that are running around the ground. Fleshy things that stick out, and they're not those things that are on the top of his head that are kind of hanging out down right now. His ears are actually totally covered in feathers, so you can't see them at all. It's really just a hole. Cool thing about ears though, or the owl ears, is that they're not symmetrical like ours are. So our ears are the same on either side. Their ears are a little bit lopsided. If you've ever seen a dog or a cat listen to something and kind of cock their head a little bit, okay, what they're doing is they're changing the height of their ears so that they can figure out exactly where the sound is coming from. It's harder to do that when your ears are both exactly level. When they're sideways a little bit, that helps you figure out exactly where things are. Hoo-dini's ears, the great horned owl's ears, are already crooked. So one of their ears is set a little bit higher, one of them is set a little bit lower, one of them is set a little bit forward, and one of them is set a little bit backwards. And because of that, that helps them figure out exactly where things are without having to turn their head, without having to tilt their head around. Now, that doesn't mean that they can't. If you notice, he might be looking around behind him, he might be looking around behind me. He actually can turn his head pretty far. Okay? Now, the reason he can do that is because his eyes are so big and he needs to be able to see all the way around. So his eyes are so big in his head to collect all the light that he actually has no room for muscles inside of his head. So his eyes can't turn. What he has to do instead is turn his head. So he's going to be able to turn his head about 270 degrees. So if you guys were to try this at home, if you guys were to sit up nice and straight and tall and turn your head as far as you can without turning your back, and turn the other way as far as you can without turning your back, humans generally can go shoulder to shoulder. He can go shoulder to shoulder and then look straight backwards. Okay? That also helps, like I said, it helps with his hearing too, because then he'll be able to hear all around him as well. Okay? Do you have any questions so far?
Yeah, Charlotte would like to know how big his wingspan is.
How big his wingspan is. His wingspan actually isn't quite as big as some of the other birds his size. I would say his wingspan is probably about 4 feet or so. If you had a hawk or an eagle or a vulture that's about the same size, their wingspan would be bigger because they're more likely to be flying around a lot. These guys are more in the woods, their wingspan can be shorter, they don't have to glide, they don't have to fly really long distances. Okay, so their wingspan is a little bit shorter. I don't know.
That is the only question so far.
Okay. I did mention that he likes to hunt a lot of things outside. Okay. Now, you guys might mention in the comments what kinds of things you think he would eat. Be really curious to see what you guys think. I will say he does not like worms. He's too big to eat worms. So while you guys are typing that in, I will mention the reason he's called a horned owl. Okay? I don't know if you can see that. He does have these feathers that stick up at the top of his head. Okay? Those are actually feathers. They're not his horns. That's what we call their horns. There's nothing inside of them. They're really just feathers. For these owls, people tend to think that they are going to be, there's something under there, at least when they first saw them. It's not the case. So for him, they're more used for communication. So they might be used to signal to another owl, hey, you look interesting, or oh my goodness, I'm scared. Okay? He might fluff his feathers out, including his horns, to make himself look big and scary. Okay? The other thing they're used for is for camouflage. You wouldn't think that a bird like this would need camouflage because they're pretty much top of the food chain. But they still can be caught unawares and still be attacked by other animals. So his color is perfect for blending in against trees. Now the horns on the top of his head actually help to break up his silhouette. So there's not a lot of things in nature that are perfectly flat, like the top of his head. Okay? So if you see a flat line like that in nature, that usually means something's there, and your eye catches it. By having those horns sticking up, that breaks up his silhouette a little bit and makes him look a little bit more like bark on a tree. Okay? Now he does have some other gorgeous coloring down there. He's got a lot of black, a lot of brown, and a little bit of white. Okay? But he does really look like bark on a tree.
You have some questions.
Sure.
Okay.
Some questions.
So, how do owls react to each other socially in the wild?
How do owls react to each other socially in the wild? For the most part, I believe these owls are going to mate at least for a season, possibly for life. They do recognize other individuals, so a great horned owl would know when another great horned owl is around. When they're in mating season and breeding season, they tend to stay away from each other because they get very territorial. Other times, they pretty much just stay away from each other anyway because they like their territory. They're not the kind to flock around. Now, I will say, a great horned owl like this could also hunt other owls too. I mentioned that they might mention that their food source is pretty varied. They like to eat smaller owls if they can catch them. So things like a screech owl or a saw-whet owl, some sort of owl that would also be coming out at night, that would be around the same area, they would not be opposed to sneaking up and taking them out too. So, yeah. Go ahead.
Lori would like to know how high he can fly.
How high he can fly? They actually don't fly too high. For the most part, they stay within the tree line. They're very well suited to be in forested areas. They're not a soaring bird.
Okay.
So not too high.
A 4-year-old would like to know if he has owl friends or gets along with any of our other owls.
He actually does have, I wouldn't say a roommate necessarily, but he does have a next door neighbor. His next door neighbor is Athena, and from what we can tell, he's pretty attached to her. So,
Easton would like to know if he hunts at night.
he does hunt at night. He is a nocturnal animal. Okay? So, he's going to be flying around looking for all sorts of things at night.
Okay, and we have some guesses about what he eats.
All right.
We have mice, small birds, foxes, skunks. I think someone knows about great horned owls.
I think so.
And around what time at night do they come out?
That's a good question. So what I learned a while ago is that when you look at an owl, you look at their eye color, and their eye color will tell you when they come out. Okay? So they're nocturnal animals, so they like to hunt when it's dark, when it's nighttime, when other animals are coming out. But if the eye color of the owl is yellow or lighter, then they tend to come out and hunt around dawn and dusk. Okay? Maybe on the darker side of dawn and dusk. If you see an owl with dark eyes, like a barred owl or a barn owl, both of those have dark eyes. They come out and they hunt at full dark, full night. So that's actually a kind of, it's a neat trick. Doesn't always work, because there's always exceptions to the rules. But in his case, he's going to hunt mostly the darker parts of dawn and dusk. Now, when we get back to the animals, all those animals that you mentioned, maybe with the exception of the fox, are definitely ones that they would try and eat. Now, I say with the exception of the fox because the fox might be more trouble than it's worth. Foxes have sharp teeth, they can hear really, really well, and they're more likely to fight back. Okay?
Babies.
Oh, the babies? Yeah, they definitely might try and eat the fox kits if they're out. Okay. And you're right, though, the foxes definitely do come out at night, so that helps too. Other things he might like to eat, he definitely likes to eat rats. He will occasionally eat smaller birds, other birds, like I said, generally the ones that come out at night. He's not going to go to your bird feeder and try and catch a sparrow. That's probably not going to happen. Plus, they're faster than he is. So he would like to try and sneak up on some animals. Okay? He definitely would like to try and eat rats, rabbits, maybe if a squirrel were out at night, if a squirrel were out late. He probably would not try a raccoon, just because they're going to fight back as well. And he probably would not try for a deer, just because they're big. One of their favorite animals to eat, though, are those skunks. I mentioned that when we had Phoebe out, that one of our other animals would like to eat them. The great horned owls definitely like to eat skunks. And if you think about it, skunks don't have a whole lot of other natural defenses. They have their stink, and that's about it. In Hoo-dini's case, he actually does not have a sense of smell. The great horned owls have almost no sense of smell. So when they're out hunting, if they see a skunk walking along the side, and you see that big black and white, everybody else would take that as a warning and say, oh no, I'm not going to bother that. He looks at that and says, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. I'm going to go eat it because it's nice and easy. Okay? So these guys love to eat skunks, and they can because they're not bothered by the smell, which makes sense. Right? Take an easy meal when you can. Do you have other questions? No? All right. I did mention that his grip is really, really strong, and that definitely helps him in hunting. If you take a look, his talons are really, really big, okay? And his talons are actually very, very strong. It's hard to get an accurate read. It's hard to get a really good read about how tight they can grip. The average adult human male, their grip strength, as tight as you can squeeze, their grip strength is about 100 pounds per square inch. Okay? So as tight as you can squeeze, if you were a full-grown human man, the tightest you can squeeze on average is about 100 pounds per square inch. For great horned owls, it's estimated to be about 500 pounds per square inch. That's 5 times as strong as a human. And it's all focused on those really sharp needle talons. So these guys are very, very good predators because of that. They can take down a lot of things. And a lot of times what they do is when they grab something, they just kind of squeeze it.
Nicole would like to know how far he can see in the dark.
How far he can see in the dark? That is a very good question. I'm not sure how many studies have been done by that. But we do have, they see differently than humans do. They definitely see differently than humans do. I don't know if there's a distance that I've seen, but they can see pretty far, and they can, like I said, they can see different things. So in humans, we can see red to violet. Okay, we can't see in the ultraviolet. We can't see in the infrared. These guys can actually see into the ultraviolet, so they can see things that we can't. The other thing, their eyes are differently done than we do. Their eyes are set differently. So when we see things, we see mostly in color, and we can see 3D, and we can see a whole bunch of different things like that. Okay, we really can't see too well in dawn and dusk. That's because we have a different set of rods and cones in our eyes. In humans, cones see color and rods see movement. Okay? In humans, our cones are centered right around the center of our eyes, and the rods are around the outside. So at night, our cones sort of turn off for a while, and our rods start to pick up, but we really can't well in the dark because we don't have as many rods in the front. Okay? These guys have many more rods than they have cones. So while they can see some color, they're mostly seeing movement. Okay? So they're noticing when things are moving around. So they might be able to see that mouse from a football field away as long as it moves. Okay? So, yeah, good question.
Lori would like to know where they build their nests.
Where do they build their nests? Oh, that's a great question. I will tell you, they actually don't build their nests usually. Great horned owls are notorious for stealing other birds' nests. Most of the time, they're going to be stealing an old eagle nest or an old red-tailed hawk nest. So anywhere that they have built their nest, that's what they take. Usually, the great horned owls are nesting before the red-tailed hawks come back and before the eagles come back. So they look over last year's real estate and say, hey, that looks like a good one. I'm going to take that one. And they build their nest and they kind of fluff it with some feathers, and that's about it. They leave all the upkeep to the other birds. Okay. They will lay little are within their first year, and we just kind of give them a boost and put them back out. But because of his wing injury, he wasn't able to go back out in the wild. He would not have been able to hunt anymore. One of the questions that we get a lot too is, what is he doing? Why is he panting? So you might notice that he's like moving his throat in and out. That is panting. For them, it's something that indicates that they're hot, or it indicates that they're having a little bit of anxiety. They're a little nervous. And I will say, we have not been using him as much as we should be, or as much as we want to be, because he's just coming out of, like I said, he's just coming out of his territorial area, his territorial time of year. And I don't know that I want to mess with a territorial great horned owl. Not with 500 pounds per square inch. They're very strong. They are very strong, right? Yeah. You might hear him hissing a little bit too. That's a general, I'm not too sure about this. I don't like this. Also, like we said before, he's a nocturnal animal. He would much rather be hiding out in his enclosure right now. Or maybe on the side of a tree. Okay. You also know exactly when an owl is staring at you, because like I said, their eyes can't move inside their heads. So you can tell exactly where they're looking. And it's kind of creepy. It's almost like a doll staring at you. Okay. Now, one of the things that owls do as well, that a lot of people generally talk about, is they make something called owl pellets. So when they're eating this food, a lot of times they're eating the whole thing. Fur and bones and nails and claws, all of it, the whole thing. Then they digest some of it, and what doesn't get digested gets coughed back up into their throat, and it stays there and it packs in a little bit. The talons, the claws, whatever it is that they swallow that they can't eat, it gets coughed back up. Now it's really great for studying because scientists can take those owl pellets and dissect them. And you might have done that before in school, or you might have done it at home. When you dissect an owl pellet, you can figure out exactly what this animal ate. Okay? So scientists can actually take that a step further. They can figure out exactly what the animal ate and which animal it is, and actually get some DNA from the owl pellets. So scientists have been able to figure out exactly which individuals. Oh, his feathers are fluffing up, so you can see. His family. Oh boy. The geese are arguing, I apologize. In the wild, once the babies are grown up, after their first year, they're out on their own. So we kind of think that he came to us in between that first year and his second year. So he probably didn't have time to find anybody else. So we're his family now.
That's it.
Okay. All right, so what I'm gonna do is I think I'm gonna put him back in, and I did want to show you a great horned owl wing. Okay, it's a little hard to see with him because he's not gonna let us get really close to him. But I wanted to show you a great horned owl wing because their wings are really, really fascinating. Okay, so I'm gonna put you back. So bye, Hoo-dini. You good? Okay. I know. But look, you're gonna go back in, okay? There you go. Step back. Good boy. Almost made it the whole video without bathing. Oh well. That happens when they get nervous. Sometimes when we move too suddenly, that happens too. Okay? So I wanted to show you, these are two wings that I have. Okay? And I wanted to show you the great horned owl wing because the great horned owl wing has something kind of unique. Owl wings in general are a different shape than a hawk wing. This one's a red-tailed hawk. They're generally a different shape. The great horned owls, or the owls in general, are a little boxier. So they're better suited for short flights. The hawk wing, it's a lot more streamlined. They're faster, okay? So they need to be fast. The great horned owls only need to be quiet. So their feathers are very, very soft, and that helps them stay very, very quiet when they fly. If you've ever heard something like a goose taking off, it's really, really loud, okay? Owls, you can't hear them at all, okay? And they do that so they can sneak up on their prey, okay? And there's something else that helps them out with that, okay? So if you take a look really, really closely, this wing has this sort of fringe on it right here. It almost looks like eyelashes, okay? Now that little fringe, it's a little bit stiff, but what that does is that breaks up the wind as it travels over the wing. And when it does that, it keeps all of the air little, all the little vortexes, it makes it little, it makes it quieter. So this little fringe actually helps the wing be totally silent when it flies, when it moves, okay? You see the hawk wing, they don't have anything like that because the hawks are relying more on speed. They don't care if they're loud. They don't care if they're quiet. They're just going to be faster than their prey, and that's about it. Okay? The owls, they have to be quieter. They rely on being really, really quiet. There's a great video we posted a while ago, and we might repost it, about a study that they did with barn owls flying over microphones, and you can't hear it at all. And that's exactly how quiet they are. So that when they see the prey, they just kind of swoop over it, glide over it, reach down, grab it, and they're gone. And that's how they hunt. Okay. All right. Are there any last questions?
Someone would like to know if we ever try to mate the animals we have, or is there a way we prevent them from mating?
So we are not a breeding facility. So we do not try and mate any of our animals. Frankly, we don't have the staff to take care of the babies. That doesn't mean that eggs are not laid. Okay, we did mention in an earlier video that Haley and Orion are two eagles. They actually do have an egg. I actually have 2 eggs. I confirmed that they have 2 eggs. So those eggs are not fertile though. Okay, since we are not these animals, so we are not great horned owls, we are not vultures, we are not eagles, we do not do a very good job taking care of them and raising them. Okay, so what we focus on more is we focus on helping the babies that do come in, okay, feeding them the best we can, and then putting them back out in the wild where they are. Okay, there are other facilities around that do focus on breeding. We let them worry about that. Okay, in order to prevent them from breeding, some of the animals, like in the case of Haley and Orion, it's just because of their injuries. They can't breed, so they can't make anything fertile. For most everything else, they're just on their own in their enclosure. Or it's 2 different species in the enclosure. Or it's, like in the case of Ursula and Socrates, though they're both female anyway, so they're not going to lay anything fertile anyway. So, I will say, if you come and visit us, Shiva, our leucistic red-tailed hawk, the white one, she just laid her egg this year. So far, she has laid an egg every year since she's been here. She's the only one here, she's the only red-tailed hawk in her enclosure, but she lays an egg every year, just like a chicken does every other day or so. Okay? Same idea. It's not fertile, it's not going to hatch into anything, but she did lay her egg. So, we're excited about that. You might see her brooding, you might see her sitting on it. Okay? All right, any other questions? All right, everybody, thank you so much for coming. Thank you so much for joining us today. Once again, like, donate, subscribe, all of that stuff. Once again, the trails are still open. Our wildlife housing area is still open. Our nature center is closed, but you are more than welcome to come around and take a hike, take advantage of some of the gorgeous days that are coming up. So thank you very much, and we'll see you again tomorrow.